Hello friends, this is Dr. Richard Ruling here to welcome you to the Breaking News channel. Thank you for being with us from time to time, and please like and share this with others. This is going to be short, sweet, I hope. um, Title is How Seventh-day Adventist Destiny Depends on the First, Second, and not third angel's message, but a third message given in 1844. It was the bridegroom message. The third angel, when Christ said, "You must prophesy again," again means a second time. And the third angel's message had not been given in 1844, but the first two had been. And to prophesy again, though, we got to get the bridegroom also into the picture. So first angel's message of judgment is not about the time of the dead, that they should be judged, as it says in Revelation 11:18. That should not worry us, because God is going to be fair with the people that are dead. And we're talking now about a warning that needs to be given when judgment is to fall on transgressors. That's how Ellen White said it in Volume 9 of the Testimonies, page 20. Are we to wait till God's judgments fall on the transgressor before we tell him how to avoid him? Well, we've been in transgression too, that as a church. And so it's a warning for us as well. And the cue for giving that first angel's message, I believe, will be when Muslims attack Jerusalem. They're going to do it. Here's a headline from WorldNetDaily.com: 57 Muslim nations urge to siege Israel. And that fits perfectly Zechariah 14. Favorite author Ellen White said every prophecy is an explanation of some other prophecy. That's the book Education, page 123. Nice to help remember us. And the point is that we need to understand how that also fits with the ram and goat conflict of vision at the time of the end. Not 1844 time of the end. It was the ram and goat conflict that Kazon in Hebrew in Daniel 8:14, that's at the time of the end. So we've had our share of mistakes, and Ellen White said the time for the unfolding of special truth in relation to the closing scenes of this earth's history is during the last generations. I think we're there, okay? And so we need to understand it better, new, fresh understanding on each message. Message now is not about investigative judgment. It's about impending time of judgment when Muslims are going to take the city. And when they do, Joel 3:16 has a message for us to give or consider also, that the Lord will roar from Jerusalem, the heavens and earth shake. Well, Ellen White said that Jerusalem is a representation of what the church will be if it refuses to walk in the light God has given. And she later said, we're not walking in the light, okay? So that's a big problem for us. We think we're great, okay? But she didn't see it that way. And as prophets of old, as Stephen, when he was being stoned, said, which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? Well, Ellen White was persecuted. When she saw the 1888 message as a message of God, and she went to with Jones and Wagner to camp meetings, leaders who'd rejected that message came to her and told her they wanted her to go to Australia, really to get rid of her. She started Avondale College there and wrote some of her best books there, came back a decade later in 1901 and appealed for reorganization, and they voted it, but never did it. Okay. In 1903, they voted a hierarchical system like the Catholic Church has, with 5 levels. The Catholic Church has priests, bishops, archbishops, cardinals, and pope, and we have pastors and conferences with all kinds of officials there, and unions with similar kinds of officials, and divisions with similar, stuff, and then finally the General Conference. So 5 levels, and her response was, how has the faithful city become a harlot? My Father's house is made a house of merchandise, a place whence the divine presence and glory have departed. Well, how does that happen? I think that we need to see that it's the organization, and somehow, even though the general conferences have been advised of this, she said, for example, in 1903, or 4 rather, we cannot enter into any new organization, for that would be apostasy from the truth. But they did it anyway, and in 1905, she said, The great apostasy which is developing and increasing will continue till the Lord descends from heaven with a shout, which means it's going to go on and on and on. We got that today. The same thing as back then. We're in apostasy. It's not about what Mark Finley said, and that is there apostasy in the church or is the church in apostasy? It's both. Okay, it's both. That's from her perspective and mine too, basically. And we need to see. I would not want to be Ted Wilson. She did not want a president of the General Conference traveling around the world telling people what to do. She thought the conferences in South America could get together and tell what's working, those presidents, and they could implement it in other countries. Doesn't need someone from Washington to come down and say what to do and wine and dine them, So I just say not a good time for travel. There's lots of problems with travel as well today. So need to get back to the format for what we're going to really need, because we're to show, Ellen White says, the order and the application of these messages. And I'm saying that the order is first angel's message first. We don't need a third angel's message right now, okay? Because God has two time clocks that that need to be integrated to these messages. The first time clock is day for a year. And in Ellen White's time, they looked at 1844, said day for a year. We're right at the right time. And I believe God wanted a church, an organization started then, because at that time, the Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto was being published for the first time, and Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species for Evolution also was beginning at that time. God wanted a church to counter these godless ideologies, evolution, and it's really mushrooming in the news today. I've tried to protest it, and I've sent out to some of you an appeal to stop the fiction of evolution. They can't do the scientific method. The scientific method calls for an experiment to prove their thesis. They can't prove anything can develop life in a test tube. They can modify viruses that mutate and give you a different type of flu that you weren't vaccinated for, but that's not really the good answer that they want to have, and they're not making life. They already had it. Well, let's get on with the understanding of the truth for our time now, which is really not being given, because that's why the messenger to Laodicea is said to be naked. Our loins are to be girded with truth. But when we don't have current truth for our time, we are naked. And this is the sad meaning of the wedding parable in Luke 12, a wedding parable that I've never heard a sermon on. I think it's relevant because it shows how we can get into the wedding. Specifically, we need to seek and try to be part of the 144,000. I believe that's God's special tool in the end time. People who are anointed. He says in Revelation 11:1, rise, measure the temple, which means judge them, see if they can fit. And in verse 3, he will give power to his two witnesses, Old and New Testament, lived in the lives of those he anoints. And he says, I'm going to give power for 1,260 days. That's 3.5 years, like Elijah had. They have the power to shut the heavens. That's what Elijah did. And Moses, turning water to blood. Okay? And when they finish their testimony, the beast ascends. Now this is the beast of Revelation 13 that's going to have power to continue 42 months in verse 5. Continues how? UN, New World Order. That is the route to papal supremacy again. Okay? Had a deadly wound, the deadly wound healed, all the world wonders after the beast, but we are in business with the UN as a denomination. That's why we mandated the shot when really not a good situation, and I'm not going to go into that really, but medical, if you look at the Bible, all 5 references to physicians are negative context. Why would we want to go to a physician and do what they say? It's about money for them, but it's about tragedy for us, because in Revelation 18 we're called out of Babylon, and part of Babylon is pharmakia. In Revelation 23, the Greek word is pharmakia, badly translated sorcery. And we don't see sorcery today. We think it's not around it, but the pharmakia is everywhere. Just talk to your neighbor, maybe. So we need to say this is not part of us, but Loma Linda is up to its eyeballs and ears with pharmakia. And it will be judged because they took Ellen White's school. She sent $5,000 to for a deposit for the property, and she wanted to train missionaries with natural remedies. Well, great idea, Ellen White. I now feel cheated that I got a medical education, was board certified in internal medicine, taught there for 4 years, but that's not what Ellen White had in mind. And even though my school got $40 million for a study to learn how Seventh Adventists live about 7 years longer, I could have saved them some money. If they just asked me, it's the writings of Ellen White, because she wrote so accurately, 100 years ahead of her time on tobacco exactly, when she said it's a malignant poison, 100 years before the Surgeon General in 1964. She said it in 1864, a malignant poison, malignant tumors in 1964 from her malignant poison. And so a warning, but they didn't ban it. And they haven't banned alcohol either, even though it's the primary cause. I just saw that today, by the way, in an article on foods that can cause cancer. Processed meat and alcohol were the two. Okay. Yes, Ellen White has been right so many times. She deserves more credit than a little girl who got a third-grade education because of an injury would ever expect, except that God blessed her with the information. And I'm sorry about Ryan Day and other people leaving the church thinking that it's too much about Ellen White, when she wasn't perfect, and she did see that the time of the end is when information will be revealed. So not everything she said was totally correct, but she had a great attitude, and she said we need all the information we can get, but the church is locked tight. I stand at the door and knock is Christ, who is the truth, and begging for entrance. That church ended an earthquake, and so will Loma Linda and the denomination, because of its incorporation, and it's about a $1.3 billion in debt for the big hospital that nobody needed, but they thought that was a great idea. Well, I'm sorry for my attitude toward this, but I just say that it's God. There's what is called poetic justice. In other words, when the punishment meets the crime, and when Loma Linda's on the ground, the punishment will be meeting the crime for what we've done, because medical care is a leading cause of illness and death, according to medical literature that I have read, and even went through the U.S. Senate with medical literature to prove it, until one senator said, you're wasting your time, they own us. Speaking of donations that the drug companies give for their reelection, they don't want to speak against that. They go along with it. And so Congress, this government, will be fallen because of pharmakia is one good reason, and the huge cost. It's our major leading industry is killing people with the drugs, basically, and trying to help them with the drugs. A definition of this is when I was teaching at Loma Linda. The dean of the School of Health came to me with a quote from Drill's textbook of pharmacology, saying that in the widest sense that pharmacology and toxicology are the same deal. Drug action always represents artificial interference with the natural functioning of the organism, and the art of medicine is to use the poisons beneficially. If medicine and pharmacology and toxicology means we're in a rat race. If we evolved from toxicology and we now call it pharmacology, those drugs, 3,500 pages of adverse drug reactions, contraindications, carcinogenesis, pregnancy warnings, fill the fine print of a large book 9 by 12 inches. And there's no way that a doctor can understand or know all of them, or even a good share of them. And so practice medicine, practice it, and come back in a couple weeks to see me again and pay me. I want to make sure you're still alive. You might say it that way. Basically, anyway, long story short, bad situation for the church, which is, we think it's the church. Really, it's not the church. Ellen White defined the church as a covenant-keeping people in her last book page 713 and 714. She said, what God purposed to do for the world through Israel, the chosen nation, he will accomplish through his church on earth today, even his covenant-keeping people. Not about a general conference or buildings, hospitals, churches, schools, lots of assets, and millions of dollars in the stock market, but it's going to fold pretty quickly in the near future, I believe. And I'm just saying, give these messages. When you see Jerusalem attack, first angel's message, and I believe no man knows the day or hour, but as the days of Noah, the flood came with Passover timing in the second spring month, which is May. Okay, and I believe we need to look at May, and this year it has unique timing with the dark day of 1780, and the dark day repeated 200 years later on May, when Mount St. Helens erupted and put ash into the sky, so that 3 states were darkened again on May 19, 1980. God was marking May 19 for this year, I believe, because it happens to fall on the last day of Passover, in May 19. And that last day also happened to be coincidentally a dark day. We may have a power grid attack. People living in the cities will be in serious problem. I mean life and death problem. As one Pentagon specialist in survival said, because the power grid is based on transformers that send electricity, but they can't make them ahead of time. They're specific for each location. And when the power grid goes down, it will take about a year to replace them, during which truckers cannot pump their fuel to their trucks, and food cannot come to the cities. People will starve to death. As in Titus time, mothers ate their own babies in 70 AD. Bad situation, but the end is not going to be better than previously. It'll be a time such as never was. So God has a movement, though, and a plan, and I urge you to get the plan and understand it better. It's this book right here, The Earthquake and Seven Seals. Okay, it's based on the idea that beware the leaven of bread, Christ said, because the leaven is at Passover time, they're to eat unleavened bread. And the preachers today leaven the bread. It's so easy to hear the sermons and go along with them and agree with them. You don't even do any mental chewing. So it's like bread that doesn't need to be chewed. Just swallow it like wedding cake, except that it's really, we need the real wedding cake, which is unleavened bread. And this has the 7 topics that we will need for the 7 days of Passover in May, when I believe we need to be studying each day one of those topics. There were topics that are emphasized 7 times. I can prove it to you partly with Christ's statement after he said, beware the leaven of the Pharisees in Matthew 16, verse 12. The next chapter, in 17, verse 11, he said, Elijah must come and restore all things. And Elijah comes in the context of Malachi 4, verse 4 and 5. When, remember the law of Moses with statutes and judgments, behold, I send you Elijah. Those statutes and judgments have a 7-fold emphasis in Ezekiel 20, where it's statutes, judgments, Sabbaths. They're linked to Sabbaths. In fact, those statutes enforce the annual Sabbaths of called feast days in Leviticus 23rd chapter. And the last verse of that chapter calls them moed, appointed times. Will we keep our appointments? I think we should. We need to understand them better. And Passover in May, I believe, is a time when we should have the Lord's Supper, as Ellen White implies in her great book, Desire of Ages, page 652.2. As he, Christ, ate the Passover with his disciples, he instituted in its place the service that was to be the memorial of his great sacrifice. If we did Passover with the Lord's Supper in place of Passover, we won't have to kill lambs or eat lambs, but we can eat the lamb spiritually. By reading the closing scenes of Christ's life, it's the best way to stay awake. Christ asked his disciples, watch and pray. Couldn't you stay awake 1 hour? Well, we can do that until midnight, because blessed is that servant whom his Lord finds watching when he comes. He's going to come and knock with an earthquake, and I believe it will be on the eve of Passover in May. I call it the 9/11 Passover because it's found or provided for in Numbers 9, verse 10 and 11. So Adventism is asleep and is headed for the grave if they don't understand these truths. Go to my website, 3 words everybody wants: health, happiness, and destiny. Health, happiness, destiny are the 3 words. Put in an and, A-N-D, .com. And for less than you pay for a Big Mac, you can get a real meal for your mind, which is more important, for your stomach or your mind. Please take a look at them. They are. I've given you biblical stuff as a reason why you should believe what I'm saying. Get the book and read it and be prepared, and share it with your friends, and maybe your newspapers. If I send you stuff, pass it to the. It's the newspaper's problem. If we see trouble coming and we don't warn people, their blood is on our hands. I'm seeing it, and blood is on my hands if I don't warn you. And if you understand what I'm saying, blood is on your hands if you don't try. And the newspaper, if they don't print what you share with them, it's on their hands, but at least you did your part. I've sent it out, and I had a message this week from Florida saying we only publish stuff in our county, okay, from Florida. Okay, well, hopefully somebody's living an SDA in Jacksonville that will send the stuff into the paper, okay? But we need to get in gear rather than ho-hum wait for Sunday. Sunday isn't coming right away. It may be proposed, it may be talked about, but we're looking behind every tree and under every rock for Sunday law, and can go back to sleep because it's not there. That's baloney. First angel coming, impending, I believe, within the coming month. Okay, and right now, watch for Jerusalem to be taken, as we talked about here, because it's Zechariah 14, and things are going to happen fast. Closing movements. You won't have time to read a book in May if you don't get interested now. So, and if you have trouble getting the book, send me the email to my last name, Ruhling, R-U-H-L-I-N-G 7 at yahoo.com. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you. I'm getting one more time for this website, Health, Happiness, and Destiny. And get the book about the 7 seals, because it's the 7 things that we have to give Christ in a covenant. Abraham gave 7 ewe lambs to Abimelech for a covenant. We need to give 7 of something, because he said, have your lights burning, and that means be active, be proactive, and we need to make the offer. More is explained later, and we will again. Thank you for sharing it. Take care.